A common question that comes up all the time, but what is this thing right here, right? So, for all my Sparkies out there, this very common item that you run across every single day. So, but what is it? What is it, and what does it do? What's the purpose of it? What does the code say about it? As far as where should they be installed? How does this thing function, right? So first of all, real simply put, in most all new construction houses, you're going to see what they call here is a GFCI receptacle. So GFCI stands for ground fault circuit interrupter. And basically this device right here, to sum it up, this device protects you from electrocution. So particularly in areas with water, right? So this device, it'll function very similar to what your breaker does inside a breaker box, right? So in it's not exactly the same, but in a sense it is. So this breaker right here, if you notice, turns on, turns off, right? So in case of an emergency, where let's say this breaker, if you notice, has a 20 on it, this breaker is rated for 20 amps. If this thing exceeds 20 amps, the energy the power that's being used on that circuit exceeds 20 amps for an extended period of time, this breaker, normally in the on position, it senses the overcurrent or the heat, and what it'll do is it opens, boom, it shuts itself off automatically. Okay, so in a sense, this GFCI kind of does the same thing, but what this GFCI is it will be closer to you than what the breaker is in your breaker box. So if this thing senses a difference in the potential energy flowing through it, it'll immediately shut itself off. It'll trip itself out, right? So that's kind of a way that I explain it and a way that I understand it, right? So the GFCI is a extra layer of protection that will open the circuit quicker than maybe this breaker will. So if, for example, you're in your restroom and you have a sink full of water and you drop your curling iron into there, you want that breaker to trip immediately. You don't want not even more than a second. You want this thing to trip immediately, to open up the circuit, to de-energize the circuit, right? So when you have this in place here, this thing is built to do that exact function, to open the circuit quicker than what this breaker will. So, and it has different thresholds of which the requirements of which it opens also. So basically this is just a device that keeps you safe from electrocution. Okay, so there's different forms of this, I would say. So this is a standard receptacle, a GFCI receptacle that you typically find in your bathrooms, your kitchens, your outdoor areas, your garage, things like that. But they also make a GFCI breaker, right? So these two things are they do the same thing. The only difference is you can obviously plug stuff into this. This is a receptacle, and this is a breaker. But this breaker is also built to provide the same function as this. Why would they use a breaker over the receptacle? Well, a couple of things that come to mind right away would be, one is these little guys right here have to be in accessible locations. They have to be somewhere where you could test them. If you look closely, it has a test button. Not sure if you could see that. It has a test button and a reset button, right? So per manufacturer's instructions, you should probably test these things monthly just to make sure that they're functioning properly. But it needs to be in an accessible area. If this thing trips and it's behind your washing machine, right? Or a good example in commercial for us is drinking fountains. Drinking fountains require GFCI protection. And if you put this GFCI inside the drinking fountain, encased inside the drinking fountain, well, it's no longer accessible. It's no longer able to service or to test, so it's no longer accessible. So in that case, you would put a GFI breaker. So that covers you by code. Now, in a lot of cases, the receptacle in a drinking fountain, you could actually put it underneath the drinking fountain to where the cord is coming out of the drinking fountain. It plugs into this thing. And so now it becomes accessible, where this is perfectly legal to use. Okay, so GFCI. One thing I'll note here is on the back of this, it says that there's a couple things to note here, right? So on the back of this thing says, notice, do not install non-weather resistant devices. I can't really see this. Non-weather resistant devices in wet or damp locations as per latest NEC code. When installing weather resistant devices in wet locations, use with approved weather resistant covers, enclosures, caulk, and gaskets. Okay, so what that's telling us is there are GFCIs that are meant for indoors and there are GFCIs that are meant for outdoor. Okay, so depending on your situation, make sure that you are using the correct one. In my case here, I believe this is a weather resistant. And maybe it's not. Typically, you would see a WR on this thing right on the cover where it says weather resistant. WR, weather resistant. In this case, I'm not seeing it, so I'm going to assume this is an indoor recep, and that's that. But anyway, what does the code say about these things? Where are they supposed to be installed? And what does the code say about it? So I'm going to get a little bit into it. I'm not going to get too far into it, but I am going to go straight to where it talks about GFCI protection and where it's required in a dwelling unit. So handy dandy NEC, I just ordered a few of these guys, the new 2023 editions for some of our guys. So they just arrived. So it's kind of cool. We got some new books here, but anyhow, 210.8, right? So 210.8 is where we will find information on where these devices are required. And so let's just go over that real quick. So 210.8, ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel. And you know what? We're going to go 210.8A, which jumps you to dwelling units, because I assume most people watching this are either electricians or you're probably a DIYer trying to figure out where to install these things and how to install them, right? So the other thing is it's not as simple as just hooking your black wires to one side, your white wires to the other side, and your ground wire to the ground. There's actually a specific way that you want to hook these things up when you have more than one cable entering a box. There's a line and a load, which we'll go over that a little bit later. But number one, 210.8A says dwelling units, all 125 volt through 250 volt receptacles installed in the following locations and supplied by single phase branch circuits rated 150 volts or less to ground shall have ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel. Okay, number one, bathrooms. So in all bathrooms in a home, in your home, all bathrooms in your home should have GFCI protection. Now, that does not mean, if you're an electrician, you know what I'm talking about, but that does not mean you need one of these in every single receptacle in every single bathroom of your house. Typically in electrical world, when we wire the receptacle that's inside your bathroom, all of those are on the same circuit. So we have one 20 amp breaker that feeds the GFCI to the first point of contact to bathroom number one. And then from here, your load will go out to the next bathroom receptacle, which at that point can be a standard receptacle. It doesn't need to be a GFCI receptacle. It could be a standard receptacle that is fed from this. So technically it's still protected by this because it's coming out of the load side of this. Okay, so all restrooms, and you could have 4 restrooms in your house, 5 restrooms in your house, it doesn't matter. In electrical world, we will commonly wire the GFCI bathroom circuit. We will put all those on the same circuit. So, of course, if you're living in a 20 bathroom mansion or something like that, then I would assume the rules are probably going to change. I don't know if the rules change necessarily, but just the way you would do your install might change a little bit, right? It might not make sense to put all 20 of those on the same circuit, and maybe it may be wise to break them up for various reasons. But nonetheless, number one, bathrooms. Number two, garages, and also, let's see here if we get a better view here. So it says garages and also accessory buildings that have a floor located at or below grade level, not intended as habitable rooms and limited to storage areas, work areas, and areas of similar use. So garages and also accessory buildings that have a floor located at or below grade level. Not intended as habitat. Okay. Simple. Garages and outbuildings. Go to your garage, same thing. You will see at least one of these in your garage, but you may have several receptacles. Well, it's the same thing. If you go and you trip go test this GFI and you trip it and open the circuit, I'm sure the rest of the receptacles in your garage will de-energize as well because they're protected by this guy. So garages, right? Number two. Number three, outdoors. Number three, that's a given, outdoor. So a common outdoor example would be your front porch or your back porch. Balconies, or if you go to the side of your house where your condensing unit is, your air conditioning condensing unit is, you're surely, and you're in newer style home, you'll find one of these as a service receptacle. So anything outside, right? Outdoors is considered a wet location. So where does GFCI protection pertain the most is in wet or damp locations. So outdoors, always. Okay. Number four is crawl spaces at or below grade level. Number five, basements. So number six, kitchens. So obviously, again, if you went into your kitchen right now, I'd say there's a really good chance that you would see at least a couple of those be above your countertops. Okay. And the NEC requires 2 small branch circuits be supplied to your kitchen countertops, and both of those branch circuits need to have GFCI protection. And because there's water, right? There's a kitchen, you're using appliances, there's a lot of wet stuff going on. You got the sink, you got the stove, you have spouts coming out to feed your water on your pots and pans. There's the refrigerator. There's just water everywhere in the kitchen. So GFCI protection is absolutely a requirement in kitchens. Number 7 says areas with sinks and permanent provisions for food preparation, beverage preparation, or cooking. Okay. So, I mean, people put sinks in weird places, right? Dog wash, right? Let's say you have a separate little room and this is dedicated to your dog. It's almost somewhat like a mud room or something. And you put a big dog wash bed in there to clean your pet. Well, in that case, you need to have GFCI protection. Okay. So, and the rule is right there. So let's go a little bit further there. Areas with sinks and permanent provisions for food preparation, beverage preparation, or cooking. Number 8 goes into sinks, where receptacles are installed within 6 feet from the top inside edge of the bowl of the sink. Okay, so I mean, it's pretty black and white right there. Wherever you have a sink, within 6 feet of that sink, whether it's in a bathroom or a kitchen or not, if you have a sink there within 6 feet of that edge of that bowl, you must have GFCI protection right here. So number 9, boathouses. Boathouse, I mean, we live in Colorado, not a lot of boathouses here, but obviously you're dealing with water again, right? The common denominator between all this stuff here is water. Number 10, bathtubs or shower stalls, where receptacles are installed within 6 feet of the outside edge of the bathtub or shower stall. So, not a common thing where I'm at where we're installing receptacles next to the shower stall, but I've seen it before. It is a thing. Some people want to, I guess want to plug their phone in or have a clock or whatever it is outside of their shower stall for whatever reason. Maybe they have some kind of they have a need for a towel warmer or whatever it is. Well, in that case, if you're within 6 feet of that shower stall, whether it's in a bathroom or not, again, if it's a shower stall, within 6 feet of it, you are installing GFCI protection. Okay. Laundry areas. So that's pretty self-explanatory. And that is your washer. That's your washing machine. That can be considered your washing machine. So going back to that, making sure these things are accessible. Sometimes your washing machine, that could be a gray area. That could be dependent on the inspector. Does he consider that accessible or not? If you have to move something out of the way, this big heavy piece of equipment, and crawl back there and get to where your plug is and to test the receptacle and remove it and all these things, is it accessible? I mean, depends on the inspector. I'm going to say probably not, though. It's not readily accessible, right? It's accessible, just not readily accessible. So I'm going to say no. So in that case, We're putting in one of these guys, a GFCI breaker, which then does the same job and covers us per code. So cool. And number 12, the last one under dwelling units, is indoor damp and wet locations. So, indoor damp and wet locations. What would be an indoor damp and wet location besides maybe an indoor swimming pool? Maybe you have a indoor sauna. Maybe. How about a mud room? How about a mud room? Yeah, when you first initially walk into your home and it's wintertime and all the kids are coming in taking off all their clothes and the boots, and you guys were just outside sledding and all that good stuff. You walk inside and all the water starts dripping off your clothes, melting into the mud room. Yeah, it's now considered a damp or a wet location. So I would say GFCI protection would be required in that situation there. So yeah. So let's get into the exceptions. Exception number 1. Receptacles that are not readily accessible and are supplied by a branch circuit dedicated to electric snow melting, de-icing, or pipeline and vessel heating equipment shall be permitted to be installed in accordance with 426.28 or 427.22 as applicable. Okay, cool. Some common sense here, right? De-icing equipment. You don't want that on GFCI protection where it might be plugged up on a downspout up on a roof or something like that, and it's, you don't want your stuff icing up, right? Like it could cause damage to your home or your building or your morning, whatever it is, and it's not exactly accessible, right? You don't want those types of things to de-energize in the middle of the night to cause further problems. So that makes sense. Exception number 2 says receptacle supplying only a permanently installed premise security system shall be permitted to omit ground fault circuit interrupter protection. Okay. Permanently installed premises security system. Makes sense again, right? You don't want your GFI nuisance tripping on your security system at night and somebody breaks into your truck in the front driveway. That sucks, right? So obviously there's some things that are that might supersede the importance of this GFCI, right? So security is one of them. That's one of the exceptions. So number 3, listed weight supporting ceiling receptacles. Utilize in combination with compatible weight supporting attachment fittings installed for the purpose of supporting a ceiling luminaire or ceiling suspended fan shall be permitted to omit ground fault circuit interrupter protection. If general purpose convenience receptacle is integral to the ceiling luminaire or ceiling suspended fan, GFCI protection shall be provided. Okay. All right. Exception number 4. Factory installed receptacles that are not readily accessible and are mounted internally to bathroom exhaust fan assemblies shall not require GFCI protection unless required by the installation instructions or listings. Okay. All right. So if I'm understanding that right, what that is talking about there, that's exception number 4 under 210.8A. Exception number 4 is talking about bathroom exhaust fan assembly. So, okay, a bathroom exhaust fan, right? So you walk in the bathroom, you turn the switch on, your exhaust fan's up there in the ceiling. So I guess thinking about this, those exhaust fans as electricians, typically, and where we're from, the electricians don't install those exhaust fans. That's a job by the HVAC guys. But it is our job to bring power to that and wire it. And normally these exhaust fans, all it is it's like a square metal case that has this detachable plate that has a motor and a fan attached to it, right? So you can remove this motor and this fan out of it, and this motor usually has a 2-prong cord coming off of it that plugs into a receptacle up inside this housing that I'm talking about, that this motor and this fan attaches to. And this housing out the back of it has a exhaust hose that vents outside of your house, hopefully. So when you turn your exhaust on, it sucks the air out and it takes it outside, right? Okay, so what they're saying, this is an exception. This is kind of ridiculous, but I guess I never consider this. But their exception is that receptacle, it is in a bathroom. And if you look at number 5 here, or I'm sorry, number 1, 210.8 number 1, bathrooms. So all receptacles in bathrooms have to have GFCI protection. Well, that's a receptacle up in your ceiling that little motor plugs into for your exhaust fan. And the way it looks is our wire comes in through the back side of that thing, and it has kind of this little junction box that's kind of removable. So we bring our wire into it. We wire up our wires to the motor, to the receptacle wire, and this little receptacle box is kind of, it's removable, right? And so once you wire it all back up, you snap it back in place, then you bring your motor in and you plug your motor into it, right? So that's kind of how that works. And that's what they're talking about, is that receptacle up there, because it's in a bathroom. There's an exception that you don't have to GFCI protect it, which, thank you. Like, I guess that's just kind of ridiculous, but I don't know. I couldn't think of a situation where somebody's going to be like, playing with the water and playing with that receptacle 8 or 9 feet up in the air, however high your bathroom ceilings are. So apparently that was an issue at some point for someone, and they figured they needed to put an exception in here to clarify, because must have been an issue somewhere in the country. So I don't know, but that's that. So those are the 4 exceptions. There's 12 areas in a dwelling unit. So a place where we live, right? A dwelling unit is like a single family home or an apartment or some place where we dwell and reside, right? So this isn't like your place of business. This isn't your brick and mortar. This is your home, basically, is how I look at that. So there's 12 different areas in the home that require GFCI protection, whether it's through the receptacle or the breaker. There's even faceless GFCIs. There's faceless GFCIs. There's the breakers off the top of my head, and then the standard receptacle. And off the top of my head, that's there might be some other instances. I know there is some other things with EV chargers that we've been running into lately that have been creating problems with nuisance tripping and things like that. But that's a whole other thing. So yeah, where is this stuff required? 1 through 12, what are your exceptions? 1 through 4. Now, lastly, hopefully you can see this on the camera. Okay, right here. If you notice, the top side of this says line. The bottom side right here says load. Every single GFCI receptacle you run into is going to have a line side and a load side. Okay? So the thing to know here is, this is where we get a lot of calls. This is where the DIYers get confused and they screw it up and they end up calling an electrician anyway and paying for them to come out and fix their mistake. Okay, so the one thing that you need to identify is what cable is your line side and what cable is the load side, okay? So your line side, that will be the wire that's coming directly from the breaker that's feeding this circuit. Now remember, I was saying you could have the GFCI, right? You could have the GFCI right here, but downstream, you could have another outlet and then another outlet and another outlet, and it's daisy chained to each outlet, right? So from the breaker box, you have your line coming into this thing. And then from the GFCI, you have the load that goes out to the remaining receptacles that might be on that circuit. So that's where people get hung up on this stuff, is you need to be able to identify what your line is. You need to understand what is we call it a home run, right? That's common terminology in the electrical world. Is your home run is that first wire coming from your breaker box to the first point of contact, whether it's in this could be in a light switch, this could be in a receptacle. I don't want to confuse you guys because we're talking about GFCIs right now, but a home run is a terminology for us to identify that first wire coming from the breaker box to the first point of contact in your electrical system. In this case, we're talking about a GFCI. That would be considered your line side wire, and then everything after that would be considered your load side wire. So for all the DIYers and the new Sparkies out there, don't screw that up, right? So yeah, and then I guess lastly, the only one other thing I can think of here that's pretty simple stuff is, you'll notice on the sides here, you have gold screws, you have white screws, and you have green screws. So if you get real confused on this stuff, man, I had an old journeyman. This guy was hilarious. He told me that black guys like gold, white guys like silver, green guys like green. Okay, so your black wire goes to the gold, the white wire goes to the silver, your ground wire, green wire goes to the green. So I don't know if that helps you. There it is. Black guys like gold, white guys like silver, green guys like green. So yeah, there it is, guys. GFCI protection. I mean, there's some more we could talk about this thing of You know, what are the thresholds of how quick does it trip? It's like what 1/140th of a second or something like that. Once it senses difference in potential of electricity flowing through this thing. Once it senses a difference of potential, this thing will immediately open in 1/140th of a second and can potentially save your life. So, or save you from harsh electrocution, burn, all that kind of stuff. So that's why you see these things everywhere. This is where they need to be. 210.8a is where you're going to find code on this explaining this. And then once we get into B, it talks other than dwelling units. So it starts getting into commercial applications, industrial applications, where you should have GFCI protection and all that. But for tonight, we're just talking about dwelling units for the DIYers and the soon-to-be journeyman electricians and all that. So yeah, holler at me, guys, if you guys have any questions. If I said something out of context and that may not have been exactly correct, let me know. Hopefully I didn't offend anybody with my my way of explaining where the black wire goes, the white wire goes, and the green wire goes. But if I did, sorry. So yeah, anyway, you guys have a good night. Holler at me if you have any questions, and until next time, see you later.